Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Notice of Preparation and Environmental Scoping Meeting. We're here at the Franklin McKinley School District headquarters, and we have more than a dozen people on Zoom and more joining as we speak. We'll be recording this public meeting for anyone who couldn't participate or who wants to view it at a later time. The video will be available on Valley Water's YouTube channel after the meeting. For our online audience, if you would like to ask a question after the presentation, please use the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen instead of the chat box. Very important. That way we'll be able to, it becomes difficult to track when we have too many comments in the chat. And staff will be able to unmute you or ask your question if you'd like us to read it. Remember, as a part of this scoping meeting, we must receive your comments in writing via email or mail during the 30-day public review period. Presentation will include details of the process and where to submit written comments by December 22nd. Today, we'll have the opportunity to learn about the project, ask questions, and provide comments about the scope and content of the information to be addressed in the subsequent environmental impact report. I'd like to introduce Valley Water Board Director for this district, District 6, Tony Estremera. Director Estremera has served on the Valley Water Board of Directors since 1996. In addition to being on the Valley Water Board, he was the directing attorney for Legal Aid Society of Santa Clara County, where he retired in December 2019. He is also on the Delta Conveyance Design and Construction JPA board, and whose mission is to build an environmentally responsive, resilient, and cost-effective project that resolves the longstanding need to assure affordable water. Without any further ado, I'd like to bring up Director Estremera to say hello.
Thank you, Mike. Welcome everyone for joining us today, especially those of you online. Thank you. Let me just quickly mention that we have also with us Martha Krieger from Senator Aisha Wahab's office, and also Plan Nguyen from Assemblymember Kaura's office. This is also their district, and they're very concerned, so they have always worked with us on this project. Also, it's my pleasure to introduce the directors, my fellow directors that share representation of most of the district that we're going to be talking about today. And that's Director Dick Santos and Director Barbara Keegan. And I'll have Director Keegan start with a few comments.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. And after everything we went through with the previous floods, the fact that it's raining tonight seems kind of appropriate. And we're very excited to have one project under construction and one project that we're planning at this point. I do want to say I'm a civil engineer by training. My master's degree is in construction management, and I have every confidence in our staff that this is a well thought out and well managed sequence of projects. So very excited. We want to hear your input in terms of phase 2 of the project and really appreciate your participation. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Richard Santos, your director of Santa Clara Valley Water District. An honor and privilege to be here. I'm here to listen and learn. I hope we can prevent the 217 floods and do a real good job for all of you. I know what it is to go flooding. I was born and raised in Alviso, lost my home 3 times to floods. So I have a lot of interest, a lot of experience. So with that, have safe holidays. We're here to be helpful. Thank you very much.
So just quickly, you know, the health and safety of our neighbors are very important to us. So we're completing this project. We believe will help relieve the neighborhoods that will benefit from flood protection that's provided by this project. Phase 1, the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project, we call it, is now in construction and scheduled for completion by the end of 2024. Tonight, our focus and our presentation is on phase 2, the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. This second phase is scheduled to start in 2025. So we'll keep the ball rolling one after the other. Now, before construction starts, we need your comments, your suggestions, so the staff can develop the draft environmental impact report. And once the draft report is ready, then we'll return to you for further comments to ensure that we address neighborhood impacts. We welcome your input, as we always have. We want the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project to reflect the community's values and the community's needs. Following the presentation, please ask questions. We have staff here ready and prepared. And of course, my colleagues and I, more than happy to answer your questions. So please ask questions. This is an opportunity for us to build the best project possible in our neighborhoods. Thank you. Mike?
Thank you, Director Estamera, and thank you, Director Keegan and Director Santos. We're well represented here tonight. Next, I'd like to bring up the folks who'll be presenting about this project. Andrew Martin, an Associate Environmental Planner for Valley Water. He will start off the presentation and he'll be followed by Valley Water Senior Engineer Robert Yamane. Presenters, welcome. Come on up, Andrew.
Thank you, Mike. I am Andrew Martin. I'm an Associate Environmental Planner for Valley Water. Welcome to the scoping meeting for the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. Let me just advance slides here. There we go. This meeting officially kicks off the environmental review process, which I'll be describing a little bit later in the presentation. It is the first of several opportunities for members of the community and for public agency staff and other interested stakeholders to give input on the project as we consider its environmental impacts and the ways that we can, reduce those impacts to the extent feasible. During the meeting, I and the project engineer, Robert, will be giving some information about the project, as well as the environmental review process and how you, the members of the public, can participate in it. There will also be an opportunity at the end of the meeting for you to ask questions and provide feedback. And in addition to myself, we also have our SCVWD environmental consultant on hand, Ryan Jolly, who can answer some questions about the SCVWD process and the document as needed. So just a quick overview of the presentation today. We'll be talking a little bit about the meeting purpose and objectives, giving an overview of the project and its background, describing where it's located, some of the elements that compose the project, a little bit about the environmental impact report and scoping process, EIR schedule and next steps, and finally, how to submit comments. So the objective of the meeting today is to give a quick overview on the flood protection project and its background. Also to talk about the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA, process and the range of issues that will be discussed in the EIR. We'll also be getting some preliminary feedback from you on some of your concerns related to the EIR scope and some of the issues related to it. And I just wanted to remind you that there's an opportunity for you to provide written feedback, which we would appreciate on this project, and we welcome that. And let's see, I guess we'll just move on to the next slide here. And I think this is where I hand it over to Robert.
Thank you, Andrew. So my name is Robert Yamane, Senior Engineer at Valley Water. So I'm going to go over the project overview of the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project. The primary objective is to reduce the risk of flooding to homes, schools, businesses, and transportation infrastructure from the flood event equivalent to the one that occurred on February 21st, 2017. And the project site is located between Montague Expressway to Tully Road in San Jose. In some background, this project is more than 20 years in the making, starting in 2000, when the voters approved the Clean, Safe Creeks and Natural Flood Protection Plan. And that kicked off the Mid-Coyote Creek project, which was intended or the goal of 100-year flood protection designed to FEMA standards. The Mid-Coyote Creek project planning study was completed in 2011. And the project was put on hold mostly due to funding, a bit cost prohibitive. However, after the 2017 flood event, Valley Water created the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project, which had modified goals to design for the 2017 February flood event. And in 2020, Valley Water received the FERC order, or Federal Energy Regulatory Commission order, for Anderson Dam. And as part of the FERC order, Valley Water was required to implement risk reduction measures for Anderson Dam. And Valley Water responded to the FERC order by creating the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project, abbreviated CCF-MMP. And what the CCF-MMP did is it pulled out certain elements from the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project and accelerated those as needed for the FERC order. And that's what's currently in construction, started earlier this year in 2023. And we have a slide showing what the construction looks like. It's very similar to the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project that we're talking about today. And the remaining elements of the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project still make up the current project that we're talking about today. And also the NOP, or Notice of Preparation of an EIR, was issued in November. And today we're here at the scoping meeting. So here on the screen in the black box is the location of the project. It's about 18 miles downstream from Anderson Dam. And at the upstream end is Tully Road. And the downstream end is Montague Expressway. And it's comprised of 5 reaches, about 9 miles long. And you can see on the screen, there's a color coding. The yellow, which is in reach 5, reach 6, and reach 7, are the reaches that have elements from the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures Project currently under construction. And then reaches 4, 6, 7, and 8 have the flood protection elements that are part of the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project that we're discussing today. This slide shows all of the potential flood risk reduction improvements proposed, consisting of flood walls, passive barriers, and berms, color coded. And so flood walls are vertical walls that contain and redirect the flood flows. Flood walls could consist of either steel sheet pile flood walls that are pushed into the ground and also have basically a cutoff below the ground, or they can be reinforced concrete flood walls that have a footing or foundation that's also under the ground. And passive barriers are what's shown on the screen here on the right side of your screen. And they are walls that are hidden below ground, lying down flat, so you can walk over them, drive over them, until flood conditions cause a mechanical deployment of the passive barrier wall. And the next slide will show what that looks like a little better, but this picture shows kind of the mechanical, what's going on inside. It's no electricity, it's all mechanical. And then berms are ridges or embankments that contain and redirect flood flows. So here's a graphic rendering of passive barriers. This particular location is at Watson Park along Jackson. And so most of the time, the passive barriers will lie down flat out of the way, so cars can drive over them, people can walk over them. And you'll see next to the passive barriers, there are vertical walls. When a flood event occurs, the passive barriers rise up out of the ground and create the continuous flood protection to contain the flood waters. And the heights range from 5 to 8 feet on this project. And they occur in other locations. That was just the one example. This picture on the screen here is of a silent piler. Well, we call it the silent piler, but it's a sheet pile installation equipment. And this is actually from the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures project that's currently in construction. Now, this piece of equipment is unique in that it has very low noise and vibrations compared to traditional pile installation, pile hammer, vibratory. And it clamps onto the steel sheet piles and just pushes them into the ground. We anticipate the construction for the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project will take 2 years, starting in the summer of 2025, completing by fall 2027. And we prioritize protecting utilities in place, and there will be tree removal and trimming or pruning as needed. And then post-construction, the maintenance would be conducted under Valley Water's stream maintenance program. Now, Andrew's gonna come up and continue on the EIR.
Great. So I'll give you a brief overview of the CEQA process. As the agency responsible for the construction and operation of this project, if it's approved, Valley Water is the lead agency under CEQA and is responsible for complying with CEQA requirements. Basically, CEQA requires disclosure of environmental impacts to the public and to the people who are responsible for making the decision to approve the project. It also provides opportunities for public feedback. In order to comply with CEQA, the project's impacts, along with any alternatives and mitigation measures to avoid or minimize impacts, will be evaluated in the environmental document. In this case, Valley Water has determined that an environmental impact report, or EIR, needs to be prepared. This triggered the start of the CEQA process. So what we're looking at here is a timeline of the process. We just kicked off a 30-day public scoping period with the release of the notice of preparation, which we released in November. This gives the public opportunities to learn about the project and comment on the scope of the EIR as discussed in the notice of preparation, and any concerns they have related to issues related to the project, environmental issues. And during the scoping period, the public has an opportunity to submit comments on the scope of the EIR and participate in a public scoping meeting, which is why we're all here today. Valley Water will consider the comments received during the scoping period when it prepares the draft EIR. So once the draft EIR has been prepared, which brings us to about the middle there, Valley Water will publish a notice of availability, and it will publish the EIR and release it for a 45-day public review period. Valley Water will then prepare a final EIR, and which consists of written responses to comments received on the draft EIR and revisions to the draft EIR text where appropriate. Later, after the final EIR is prepared, Valley Water will hold a board of directors meeting to consider whether to certify the EIR and approve the project. Let me just back that up: to approve the project or a closely related project alternative. If the board chooses to certify the EIR and approve the project, the last step in the process occurs when Valley Water prepares the notice of determination and files that with the county clerk. That ends the CEQA process. So here's a timeline. So we've just released the notice of preparation to prepare an EIR. We did that just before the Thanksgiving break, and there's a 30-day scoping period associated with that. That period closes on December 22nd. We are going to then prepare, after receiving comments during the scoping period, we're then going to prepare a draft EIR. As I mentioned earlier, it goes through a public comment period. There'll be another public meeting at that time to take comments on the draft EIR. That'll be in the summer of 2024. And then the final EIR will be prepared after receiving comments on the draft EIR and will be completed towards the end of next year, followed by a public meeting to consider certification of the EIR and approval of the project. So really the purpose of the scoping process, the scoping meeting, is to obtain input on environmental concerns from, again, the public, public agencies, and other interested stakeholders, and to address those comments or concerns when Valley Water is preparing the draft EIR. It also gives us the opportunity to identify some resource topics and issues that Valley Water anticipates will be analyzed in the EIR. So here's a list of key topics to be addressed in the EIR, and I'll just run down through them really quickly. Aesthetics, air quality, biological resources, cultural resources, geology, soils and paleontology, greenhouse gas emissions, hazards and hazardous materials, hydrology and water quality, land use and planning, recreation, transportation, tribal, cultural resources, and utilities and service systems. So in addition to this, the EIR will also be analyzing cumulative impacts, growth-inducing impacts, and other issues as required by CEQA. Move on here. So projects stemming from this project come from both construction and operation. They range from temporary, short-term, to long-term, to permanent. So here's a short list of potential short-term construction-related impacts due to the project. They include temporary noise and vibrations from construction equipment during construction, emissions from construction equipment, and dust during ground disturbance, effects on special status species and their habitat, disturbance of buried hazardous materials and waste during ground disturbance, and temporary disruption of access to recreational facilities, and related to that, an increase in the use of other facilities due to lack of access during construction. We have a list here, a short list of what Valley Water foresees as long-term or permanent impacts from the project. These include changes in scenic resources from various public viewing areas along Coyote Creek, like parks and other public spaces, conflicts with local policies on scenic and visual quality, specifically around Coyote Creek, tree removal, the effects of tree removal adjacent to Coyote Creek, effects on a landscape level, changes to erosion and scour within Coyote Creek due to changes in the flows, velocities from the improvements, and changes in hydrology and water quality due to changes in the geometry of the creek, and effects on flood flows and conveyance. And on this last point, I just wanted to add that the goal of the project is to have a positive effect on flood flows and conveyance and how that flow is managed in the future. So I think that rounds out some of the key issue areas that will be addressed in the EIR. As far as how to comment, we said welcome comments in writing. We encourage those of you who have a comment on the scope of the EIR or an issue related to the EIR to submit those in writing. As far as how to formulate your comments, you should identify any environmental areas of concern that you're concerned about, clearly specify the impacts from the project that you're concerned about, and if you can think of any, suggest any mitigation measures that could potentially reduce any significant impacts from the project to a less than significant level. So submitting comments is easy. You can submit them to me by mail or by email as shown here. And just as one last reminder, comments are due by December 22nd. That's the end of the scoping period. And I think that's it.
Thank you very much, Andrew and Robert, for that very thorough and detailed presentation on what we're going to be considering as part of the scoping for the preparation of the EIR. We'd be happy to answer your questions now for those members, nearly 20 on Zoom. We'd love for you to put your question in the Q&A portal or raise your hand and we can unmute you. Jose, do we have any questions from our Zoom attendees at this time?
We currently do not, but one question that did come up is that talk a lot about the environmental planning process. Know that. What are some of the regulatory agencies that eventually will see this, and what's going to be their role with this?
That is not a question I would answer, but Andrew is well equipped to answer it.
Good question, Jose. Well, we will be working in the vicinity of Coyote Creek. There will be some work on the riparian zone of Coyote Creek, some tree removals, and also some temporary work in water in the creek. And because of that, there will be several agencies involved in the project, including the Army Corps of Engineers, Regional Water Quality Control Board, California Department of Fish and Wildlife. Those will be the main agencies that we'll be we will be working with, partnering with to get permits for this project. Does that answer the question?
Sure does. Thank you.
While we're waiting for our Zoom attendees to add a few questions in the mix, I wanted to make a point that the slide presentation from this meeting is posted already on the Valley Water project page, as well as the photos. So this is a scoping meeting, but some of the pictures show some of the challenges that have been faced on this creek in the past when we've had high water events. So feel free to check that out at valleywater.org. Go to the project updates and click on Coyote Creek. Any other questions, Jose, coming in?
Yes, we just received a question right now from one of our Zoom attendees. Go ahead and read that. Oh, actually, we have two. Go ahead and read that.
Good job, attendees.
Are you able to address which measures will be used in each reach?
Which measures will be used in each reach? So there's 3 reaches of the project, and the elements of flood control will be used. So some areas will have the pop-up passive barriers. Some will have sheet piles that create a flood wall, and then there are, I'm sure, earthen berms. Thank you. I phoned a friend, and so those are highlighted on the maps that are on the project page, and you can blow that up and see it in detail. It's a substantial, and it was in the mailer. The invitation that you received, if you received one in the mail, opens up to a terrific project map that shows those in detail, and that's what we'll be analyzing as a part of the scoping.
Is that map on the presentation? Maybe we can bring it up. And
yeah, that's a great idea.
Andrew or Robert can maybe do a quick overview
here,
maybe
and
starting from the north, working south. Highlight some areas.
Okay, there's also in the notice of preparation that was sent out, there are individual pages, blown up maps of each of the 4 reaches with the Coyote Creek Flood Protection Project elements. And that's easier to see than this overall map. But starting from the downstream end at reach 4, because this slide is a little hard to see, At the top of the map in Reach 4, there are some flood walls and passive barrier. That's at the Charcot Avenue Road bridge crossing over Coyote Creek. So in Reach 4, it's flood walls and passive barrier. And then there's no Coyote Creek flood protection elements planned in Reach 5. Those are only being constructed as part of the Coyote Creek Flood Management Measures project, which is currently under construction. And then in Reach 6, there are a combination of some flood walls, passive barrier at the Watson Park. I do wish I could zoom in here, and a berm. And then in Reach 7, in the William Street Park and Selma Olinder Park, there are a lot of passive barriers and flood walls. And then moving on down, in Reach 8, there's a combination of all three, flood walls, passive barriers, and berms. I would recommend looking at the zoomed in maps that was sent out with the NOP and is available on the project website for a little bit better detail exactly where each of the elements occur.
Can you maybe explain what's gonna go around William Street Park and Olinder Park? I believe that my guess is that's probably where the interest is coming from this resident.
Yeah, let me. So, yeah, so this is Watson Park, but we do have most of the elements, I think I could say most, but most of the elements are passive barriers, or there's a lot of passive barriers around the parks to keep access open, recreational access open during most of the time when there's not a flood. And so around William Street Park, coming up from the south up along North William Street Park, there are passive barriers that lay down along the sidewalk, and then curves around William Street and up to the bridge, and then going over the William Street Bridge onto the Selma Linder Park side. We're working with the City of San Jose Park staff, combination of flood walls, passive barriers, and berms to go through the Selma Linder Park. And then down the other side, along the sidewalk, similar to William Street Park, is basically all passive barriers to keep the access open. So mostly passive barriers are being used. This what you see on the screen here.
I believe there's a short flood wall near the school as well to protect the school between the creek and the school.
Yes, that's a flood wall there with gates.
Great. We have another question. The next question is, William Street Park has major events like Bark in the Park, 4th of July, pastries in the park sponsored by the campus community. How can we coordinate?
During construction, probably.
Yes, yeah, yes.
Yeah, we'll be coordinating very close with the City of San Jose. I think all these comments, though, we want to make sure that they are submitted in writing, please, even though you're asking them over Zoom. Please submit the comments in writing to Andrew Martin so that we can officially capture them. But yeah, we will be coordinating very closely with City of San Jose and City of San Jose Park staff to work around these events.
We will for sure know the dates of some of those events and try to our best to accommodate that. This is some time from now when that work will be done, but we'll definitely submit those in writing and we'll have those responses and they'll be considered as a part of the EIR. Any other questions, Jose, coming in?
Not on Zoom, but one question is, if I'm getting ready to submit my comments and I have a question, who should I call? I'm not sure. We can get some guidance maybe.
If it's about the project itself, that would be Robert Yamane or Jose Villarreal, who's the community liaison. And if it's about the environmental process, Andrew would be your bet. But if you're not sure, always call Jose and he'll make sure it gets to where it needs to go,
Great.
or whoever is
will.
answering Jose's email and phone.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you. That's a great point. Any other questions on there, Jose, coming in? I would encourage you all to ask away. We've got some great experts here to answer. But the key, if you have a great question, you can ask it here, but also put it in writing and we'll be sure it's included in our scoping process.
Another question, fast forwarding to the start of construction. There's a lot of issues that were listed as part of environmental impacts. And say construction is getting ready to start, how am I as a resident going to know what to expect? Noise, traffic, dust, all those sort of things. How's Valley Water going to let me know?
Great question. That's a great question. And the name I just said is going to be on our lips again. As a part of the construction process, we will be sure to use Nextdoor, and in the Negley Park area, the campus community association email list. There'll be mailings. If it's going to be very intensive, sometimes we'll even do a door-to-door canvas to make sure that the property owners are aware that certain things are going to be happening, especially if it's in their property. But we will do our very best, and we'll have subsequent meetings, as well as you have elected representatives who I didn't forget but are behind me, so I didn't see you right away. You have elected directors here who are always available to get your contact if you're not getting an answer that you're satisfied with, or if you want to just start at the top, you can reach your directors through their emails that are listed on the Valley Water webpage.
And to also add to that, we typically do a pre-construction meeting right before going into construction in any neighborhood, so that folks can ask questions and understand exactly what we're doing and that sort of thing. So please expect that to happen right before the start of. Well,
absolutely. We have and a lot of those meetings and that information resides on the project page on our website. And so if you wanted to see either this recording or a prior recording or a future one, that's the place to go, and you'll be able to get that information. And if you have trouble finding it, again, Jose Villarreal will be your point of contact. But it seems like Jose, we have one more?
Yes, we just received a question via Zoom. The question is, what will be done to mitigate tree removal?
That's a great question. I'm going to bring up Andrew, who I'm so happy to see in the front row.
That is a good question. What I can tell you at this point is that Valley Water is considering, mitigating for the trees with, an off-site mitigation approach. There will be tree removals and trimming as part of this project. So those trees will have to be mitigated for. There will have to be, something done to, we will also have to get permits from the city of San Jose for tree removals, because it's within the city's jurisdiction. And so we'll have to go through that permitting process, but we will have to come up with a mitigation scenario to mitigate for the loss of those trees. And we're still formulating that strategy. So this is a really good comment, and something that I would very much encourage you to submit in writing, so that our consultant who's preparing the EQA document can consider that in the scope of the EIR.
Thank you very much for that question and great response, Andrew. And Jose, I'm going to look at you one last time. We're going to bring this meeting to a conclusion if we don't have another online question. Just a reminder that this presentation will be on our website at valleywater.org. I'd like to thank our presenters and attendees for their work and the stakeholders who participated and shared their comments. Please remember to submit them in writing by December 22nd. And then in the next few days, we'll post the recording of today's meeting in case there's something that you wanted to check. But again, please submit it in writing. And before we close today's meeting, we ask that you consider learning more and providing your input on two critical Valley Water efforts: our water supply master plan. It's our guiding document for long-term investments and planning to ensure water supply reliability for our county's social, economic, and environmental well-being. Information, we have a handout in the back of the room, and that link will be shared in the chat box. Already has. So please learn a little bit more about that if you would. And our capital improvement program contains all of our funded and unfunded capital projects. The annual review of projects for potential placement in the CIP 5 years plan is beginning right now. We want your input on the projects we should prioritize. Click on the link shared in the chat box for more information. And you can also visit our Valley Water webpage and click on the board committees under how we operate topic. Next CIP meeting is December 11th. And we have another final question.
Yes, we did receive another
Final
question.
Jeopardy. Okay.
Here's the question. What steps to avoid disturbing birds during tree trimming, February-fall? In other words, what steps will be
Between
taken?
February and fall?
Yeah.
What steps do we take to?
What steps are we taking to avoid disturbing birds during during the tree trimming work?
So that sounds like a question on the first project that's under construction. Or do we want to be able to, how would we handle that during this phase of this project? I'm less clear.
I think it's just in general. What are we doing?
Okay.
Whether it's the current
Come on
project
up, Andrew.
or the upcoming project?
What sort of steps would we take? And that's a terrific question to submit in the chat so that we consider, but I'll let Robert.
We have like a nesting bird surveys done with a qualified biologist. And if there's a active nesting bird, they're usually, we create a buffer zone. Typically, I'm speaking kind of typically what is done on virtually all the projects I work on, but a buffer zone is put around the tree or where the nest is, and then until the babies, the fledglings, till they leave the nest, and then construction can continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for bringing that in on just under the wire and to our attendee. And with that, I'd like to say thank you to everyone who participated virtually and in person. And this meeting is now concluded. Thank you very much.